I came home from my second deployment on a Tuesday morning in October. Fort Campbell, Kentucky. The tarmac smelled like jet fuel and cut grass, and something underneath both of those things that I could never name, but always recognized. The smell of being back. The smell of American ground under your boots after 8 months of not having it. My name is Sergeant First Class Renata Cole. I am 34 years old. I have been in the United States Army for 12 years. Military police. I have done 2 tours in the Middle East and 1 training rotation in Germany, and I have spent more nights sleeping on a cot in a forward operating base than I have spent sleeping in my own bed in the last 4 years. I am good at my job. I am good at reading situations. I am good at knowing when something is wrong before it announces itself. That is what makes what happens so hard to explain, even now. My husband's name was Terrell Wayne Okafor. We met 6 years ago at a barbecue at my unit buddy Sharice's house in Clarksville. He was tall, easy to laugh, had a way of listening that made you feel like whatever you were saying was the only thing worth hearing. He worked as a physical therapist at a clinic on Riverside Drive. He coached youth basketball on Saturday mornings at the rec center on Dover Road. He was, by every measure I had, a good man. We got married 4 years ago at the courthouse in Montgomery County on a Wednesday afternoon in April. No big ceremony. Just us and 2 witnesses and a judge named Patricia Holloway who wore reading glasses on a beaded chain. Terrell wore a navy suit. I wore a cream dress I had bought 3 days before. We had lunch at a Thai restaurant on Main Street after. Pad CEW and iced tea and a slice of coconut cake the size of my fist. That was our wedding. I thought about it on the plane coming home. I thought about the coconut cake and the way he had held both my hands when the judge pronounced us married, like he was afraid I might float away. I should have trusted that memory more than I trusted what came next. But I did not know that yet. Now, let me back up. What I noticed first was the apartment. Terrell and I had been renting a 2-bedroom unit on Greenwood Avenue since the year before my second deployment. 2nd floor, corner unit, cream-colored walls, a kitchen with a window that looked out over the parking lot and a strip of trees beyond it. Nothing fancy. But it was ours and we kept it clean, and there was a brass hook by the front door where I always hung my patrol cap when I came in. When I walked through that door on that Tuesday in October, the hook was gone. Not the cap. The hook itself. The brass one I had screwed into the drywall 2 years earlier. Just a small circle of unpainted plaster where it used to be. I set my duffel down. I looked at the wall for a moment. Terrell came out of the bedroom and hugged me, and I hugged him back, and he smelled the same way he always smelled, like cedar soap and something warm underneath it, and I told myself the hook was nothing. He had probably redecorated. People do that. But I am military police. My entire job is noticing what does not fit. A missing hook is not a decoration choice. A missing hook is a hole in the wall that someone tried to undo. I filed it away. The second thing was the bedroom closet. I had left half of my civilian clothes in that closet when I deployed. 3 pairs of jeans, some tops, a gray cardigan I had owned since college. Standard stuff. When I opened the closet that first evening, I noticed the hangers on my side were pushed to one end. Crowded together. Like something had occupied the other half and been recently removed. I ran my hand along the rod. The hangers slid easily. Too easily. Recently moved. Terrell was in the kitchen making dinner. I could hear the pan on the stove. I closed the closet. You know that feeling when your training kicks in before your heart does. When the part of you that reads rooms and reads people and reads situations starts processing data before the part of you that loves someone has a chance to say, stop. You're looking too hard. This is Terrell. This is 4 years. This is the man who held your hands at the courthouse in April like he was afraid you would float away. That is where I was. I sat on the edge of the bed and I looked at my hands for a moment. Then I went to the kitchen and I sat down at the table and I watched my husband cook dinner and I smiled when he looked over at me and I said it smelled good. Because I was not ready yet. And I had learned a long time ago, in a different kind of training, that you do not move until you know exactly what you are moving toward. The first 2 weeks back were good. I want to be honest about that. Terrell took 3 days off work when I got home. We drove up to land between the lakes on the second day, just the 2 of us, packed a cooler with sandwiches and 2 bottles of sparkling water, and drove up there with the windows down and the radio on low. The trees were full October color, rust and amber and a deep red that looked almost burgundy against the gray sky. We walked a trail along the water for about 2 hours. Did not talk much. Just walked. His hand in mine the whole way. That night we sat on the tailgate of his truck and watched the sun go down over the lake, and he said, "I missed you every single day." I believed him. I want you to understand that. I believed him completely. Not because I was naive. Because he said it the way a person says something true. No performance in it. No extra weight. Just the words, flat and quiet, the way real things sound. I let everything I had filed away in those first 48 hours just dissolve. The hook. The closet. Gone. I told myself I had been deployed for 8 months and I was reading shadows. We drove home that night with my head on his shoulder and the radio playing something old and slow. That was the loyalty trap. Because 10 days later his phone rang at 11:15 at night and he took it to the bathroom. I was already awake. I sleep light. 8 months in a FB will do that to you permanently. I heard the bathroom door close. I heard his voice, low and careful, the way you talk when you are trying not to be heard through a door. I lay still. He came back to bed 11 minutes later. I know because I had been watching the ceiling and counting. I said, "Everything okay?" He said, "Yeah, just Marcus checking in about Saturday practice." Marcus was the assistant coach at the rec center. I had met him once at a cookout the year before I deployed. He had a wife and 2 young kids, and I had never once known him to call anyone at 11:15 on a Wednesday night. I said, "Okay." I turned over. And in the dark, I opened the notes app on my phone and I typed one line. Wednesday, 11:15 p.m. Bathroom. 11 minutes. 12 years of military police. You write it down. Always. What I found next I did not go looking for. I need to say that clearly. It was a Saturday morning, 8 days after the phone call. Terrell had left for the rec center at 8:30. Youth basketball ran 9 to 11 every Saturday. I had stayed home, still adjusting to civilian time, still waking up at 4:45 out of habit and lying in the dark waiting for a bugle call that was not coming. I decided to do laundry. I gathered everything from the bedroom, stripped the bed, pulled the hamper from the closet. At the bottom of the hamper, underneath Terrell's practice shirts and a pair of sweatpants, I found a receipt. A folded receipt from a restaurant called The Lantern on Madison Street in downtown Clarksville. Dated September 14th. I had been deployed until October 8th. The receipt was for 2 people. Dinner for 2. 1 order of the pan-seared salmon. 1 order of the ribeye. A bottle of Malbec. Total came to $112. I stood in the bedroom with that receipt in my hand. The Lantern is not a casual restaurant. It is white tablecloths and low lighting and the kind of place you go when you are trying to make an impression on someone. Terrell and I had been there once, for our 2nd anniversary. He had made a reservation 3 weeks in advance. I sat down on the edge of the stripped mattress. I did not cry. I did not move for a while. I am military police. I process the scene before I process the feeling. That is not a choice. That is 12 years of training living in my body whether I want it there or not. I took a photograph of the receipt with my phone. Front and back. I noted the date, the amount, the items. I folded it exactly as I had found it and put it back at the bottom of the hamper under the same shirts. Then I stood up. I went to the kitchen. I poured a glass of water. I drank it standing at the counter looking out the window at the parking lot and the strip of trees beyond it, the same view I had looked at 100 times before deployment, the same trees, now bare, just gray branches against a white October sky. I thought about the bottle of Malbec. Terrell and I had a bottle of Malbec at our wedding lunch. Same variety. He had remembered that detail 4 years later and ordered it for someone else at a white tablecloth restaurant while I was sleeping on a cot 8,000 miles away. I set the glass down on the counter. I went back to the bedroom. I finished the laundry. I folded everything. I put it away. Then I sat at the kitchen table and I opened the notes app on my phone and I wrote down everything. The receipt. The date. The restaurant. The amount. The Malbec. Below that I wrote the hook entry from 3 weeks earlier. Wednesday, 11:15 p.m. Bathroom, 11 minutes. Below that I wrote the 2 things from the first day. Brass hook removed from wall by front door. Closet hangers displaced on my side. Recently moved. I looked at the list for a long time. Then I closed the app. And I started thinking about what came next. There is something nobody tells you about coming home from deployment. Everyone talks about the reunion, the tarmac, the hugging, the first meal that is not a DFAC tray or an MRE. Nobody talks about what happens when you get home and realize that the person who was supposed to be holding things together while you were gone was doing something else entirely. Nobody trains you for that. I spent 3 days after finding that receipt doing nothing different on the outside. I woke up at the same time. I made coffee. I went to the PX on post for groceries. I cooked dinner Tuesday night and let Terrell tell me about his week at the clinic, and I listened and nodded and asked questions in the right places. Inside, I was working. I called my friend Charisse on Wednesday morning. She was still active duty, stationed at Fort Campbell, same as me, running logistics out of headquarters company. We had been friends for 9 years. She was the kind of person who listened completely before she said a single word. I told her everything. The hook, the closet, the receipt, the phone call at 11:15. All of it in order, the way I would brief a situation report. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Renata, you already know." I said, "I know what the evidence suggests. I do not know what I am going to do about it yet." She said, "What do you need?" I said, "I need a name. Someone good. Someone quiet." She gave me the name of a woman named Corporal Dana Reyes, recently separated from the Army, running a small investigations firm out of an office on Commerce Street in Clarksville. Charisse had used her the year before for a completely different matter involving a landlord dispute. Said she was thorough and did not talk. I called Dana Reyes that same afternoon. We met the next morning at a coffee shop on Fort Campbell Boulevard, away from Post, away from anyone who knew either of us. She was 38, compact, with close-cropped natural hair and the kind of stillness that former military people carry in their bodies even years after they separate. She ordered black coffee and listened to everything I said without writing a single thing down. When I finished, she said, "How long do you want me to work it?" I said, 2 weeks. I want to know what I am actually dealing with before I make any decisions. She nodded. She said, "I will contact you only by this number." She slid a card across the table. Plain white. Just a phone number. No name. I put it in my cargo pocket. I drove back to Post, and I sat in my car in the parking lot outside my unit building for about 10 minutes. I thought about the Army. I had given 12 years to this institution. I had deployed twice. I had been away from home for a combined total of 22 months in the last 4 years. I had done that because I believed in something. Service. Duty. Showing up when it is hard. I had applied that same belief to my marriage. I had served that too. Faithfully. Without reservation. And somewhere between my first deployment and my second, something had shifted in that house on Greenwood Avenue. Something had moved. Like those hangers in the closet. Displaced. Recently changed. I got out of the car. I put on my patrol cap. I went back to work. Because that is what you do. You do not fall apart in the parking lot. You do not make decisions when your hands are shaking. You gather your information. You assess the situation. You wait for the right moment. Then you move. Dana Reyes called me on a Friday afternoon, 11 days after our meeting at the coffee shop. She said, "I have what you need. Can you come in tomorrow morning?" I said yes. I drove to her office on Commerce Street at 9 o'clock Saturday morning. Second floor, plain door, a window that looked out over the street. She had a folder on the desk when I walked in. She slid it across without preamble. Inside were photographs and a 2-page written report. The woman's name was Cassandra Pruitt, 31 years old. Dental hygienist. She lived in an apartment complex on Wilma Rudolph Boulevard, 12 minutes from our place on Greenwood Avenue. Dana had documented 9 meetings over 11 days. The Lantern on Madison Street twice. A park on the east side of town. Cassandra's apartment complex 4 times. The last visit lasting until 2:17 in the morning on a Thursday when I had been at a mandatory unit function on post and had texted Terrell that I would be home late. He had texted back, "No worries. Get some rest." I read that part of the report twice. I looked at each photograph slowly. I did not rush. I treated it the way I treat any evidence review. Methodical. One item at a time. Dana sat across from me and did not say anything. When I finished, I closed the folder and set it flat on the desk. I asked her how long she thought it had been going on. She said, "Based on what I found and some of the patterns I observed, I would estimate this started around the 4th month of your deployment." Month 4. I had been gone 8 months total. That meant this had been happening for the better part of 4 months before I came home to that apartment, to that missing hook, to those displaced hangers, to a husband who held my hands on a tailgate at Land Between the Lakes and said he had missed me every single day. I sat with that for a moment. Then I picked up the folder. I thanked Dana. I paid her in full. I walked down the narrow staircase to the street. I sat in my car. The morning was cold. A hard November cold that had come in overnight. I had not brought a heavy enough jacket, and I could feel it through my sleeves. I took my phone out. I did not call Terrell. I called the legal assistance office on post. Fort Campbell has a JAG office, Judge Advocate General, and they handle family law matters for active duty soldiers. I had an appointment by Monday afternoon. The JAG attorney I met with was a captain named Hollins, 29 years old, steady and precise. He explained my options clearly. Tennessee equitable distribution. Active duty protections under the Service Members Civil Relief Act. Documentation requirements. When I laid Dana's folder on his desk, he looked through it and said, "Sergeant First Class Cole, you have done most of the work already." I said, "I am military police, sir. Documentation is the job." He almost smiled. I drove home that Monday evening and I made dinner and I set the table and I sat across from Terrell and I watched him talk about his day at the clinic and his Saturday practice with the kids and I listened to every word. I had already filed the initial paperwork that afternoon. He did not know that yet. I had chosen the following Saturday to tell him. Ava's volleyball tournament weekend, in this case, I had coordinated with Charisse to be available. I did not want to be alone in that apartment after. I wanted someone I trusted within a 10-minute drive. Everything was in place. When Saturday came, I was up before him. I made coffee. I sat at the kitchen table in the gray early morning light with the folder in front of me and my phone face down beside it. He came out at 7:50. Surprised to see me up. He said, "You okay?" I said, "Sit down, Terrell." He looked at my face. He sat down. I did not raise my voice. I did not cry. I opened the folder and I told him what I knew. Dana's name. The 11 days. The 9 meetings. Cassandra Pruitt on Wilma Rudolph Boulevard. The visit that lasted until 2:17 in the morning on the Thursday. I had texted him that I would be late. I set one photograph on the table. Just one. He looked at it. His hands were flat on the table and he did not move them. He started to say something. I do not know what it was going to be. I held up one hand, not a dramatic gesture, just a quiet one, and he stopped. I said, "I have already spoken to JAG. The paperwork has been filed. I want you to get your own attorney this week. Not because I am angry. Because that is the cleanest way to do this." He put his face in his hands. I watched him for a moment. I felt something that was not triumph and was not relief. Something quieter than either of those. Like the feeling at the end of a long patrol when you have checked every corner and cleared every room and you know exactly what the situation is. I stood up. I picked up the folder. I put on my jacket. I said, "I am going to Charisse's. I would like you to make arrangements to stay somewhere else this weekend. I think that is better for both of us." I walked to the front door. I stopped. There was a small mark on the wall where the brass hook used to be. A circle of unpainted plaster, about the size of a quarter. I looked at it for a moment. Then I walked out. The divorce was finalized 5 months later, on a Thursday afternoon in March. Captain Hollins at JAG had been exactly what I needed him to be. Precise. Unflappable. He walked me through every step without drama and without false comfort. He told me what to expect and he was right about most of it. The parts he was not right about, he had already warned me were uncertain. That is all you can ask of anyone. The process was not easy. I want to be honest about that because I think people sometimes expect the justice part to feel clean. It does not always feel clean. There are forms and waiting periods and conversations that have to happen even when you do not want to have them. There are moments when you are sitting in a JAG waiting room in your ACUs at 8 in the morning and you think about a Thai restaurant on Main Street and a slice of coconut cake and a judge named Patricia Holloway with reading glasses on a beaded chain. And something in your chest does a thing that you do not have a name for. I let those moments come. I did not fight them. I just did not let them make my decisions for me. Charisse was there for most of it. Not in the legal sense. In the way that matters more. She showed up at my door on that first Saturday with 2 cups of coffee and a bag of food from the DFAC, and she sat with me on the floor of my living room for 4 hours and did not ask me to explain anything I was not ready to explain. That is the kind of friend you spend a whole life trying to find. I found mine at a barbecue 9 years ago, and I have never once taken it for granted. I stayed in the apartment on Greenwood Avenue through the winter. It was my name on the lease, had been since the beginning, and I was not going to be the one who left. I took the weeks after that Saturday morning to go through the apartment the way I go through anything. Methodically. I replaced what needed replacing. I repainted the accent wall in the bedroom a deep slate blue that I had always wanted and Terrell had always said was too dark. I bought a new set of dishes. I fixed the bathroom faucet that had been dripping since August. And I put a new hook by the front door. Not brass this time. Matte black. Stronger. I drilled it into a stud instead of just the drywall so it would not come out easily. I hung my patrol cap on it the first morning after I put it in. It is still there. There is something I want to say about deployment. About what it asks of you and what it takes and what it assumes. When you deploy, you hand your life at home to someone else to hold. You do not have a choice about that. You go where the army sends you and you trust that the thing you left behind will still be there when you come back. Your apartment. Your routines. Your marriage. You are trained for everything that might happen downrange. Threat assessment. Rules of engagement. Convoy procedures. You are trained for almost nothing that might happen at home. Nobody briefs you on what to do when the person holding your life decides to set it down. I do not say that with bitterness. I say it because I think it is important to name. There are women in uniform all over this country who come home from deployments and walk into houses where something has shifted. Where hangers have been moved and hooks have been removed and receipts have been buried under laundry. And they blame themselves first. Because that is what we are trained to do when something goes wrong on our watch. It was not on my watch. I was 8,000 miles away doing my job. What happened in that apartment was not a failure of my attention or my love or my commitment. I gave all 3 of those things completely. The fact that someone chose not to honor that is about them. Not about me. It took me a while to get there. But I got there. I am still at Fort Campbell. I made Master Sergeant 8 weeks ago. The ceremony was small, just my unit and Charisse and my mother who drove up from Murfreesboro and cried through the whole thing. Charisse took a photograph of me right after the promotion, in my dress uniform with a new rank on my collar, standing in the afternoon light outside the ceremony room. I look at that photograph sometimes. I look steady in it. Not happy exactly. Not performing anything. Just steady. Like a person who has been through something and come out the other side, still standing in their own boots. That is enough. That is more than enough. My father was a man of very few words. He was a postal worker for 31 years in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, drove the same route for most of that time, knew every house on it by name and habit. He used to say, "You cannot control the weather. You can only control whether you show up." I showed up. Every single time. For the army and for that marriage and for myself. I am still showing up. There is a quote I came back to a lot in those months after October. Something my drill sergeant said to me in basic training, a woman named Staff Sergeant Graves, short and precise and completely without sentimentality. She said it during a particularly bad week when 3 people in my platoon had quit and the rest of us were running on no sleep and cold food and pure stubbornness. She said, "The mission does not care how you feel about it. Complete the mission. Feel whatever you need to feel after." I completed the mission. I am feeling what I need to feel after. And if you are watching this tonight, if you are someone who has ever put on a uniform and handed your life to someone else to hold while you went and did what your country asked of you, I want you to know something. You are not too strong to hurt. You are not too trained to grieve. And you are absolutely not responsible for what someone else chose to do with the trust you gave them. Complete your mission. You can feel the rest of it after. If this story reached you tonight, wherever you are, whatever you are carrying, drop the word mission in the comments below. I want to know you are here. And if you are new, subscribe. New stories every week. Stories about real people doing hard things with quiet dignity. I will see you next time.